So this is a story about how we essentially took care of users and how that's helped with Butter's growth. A bit about me. So I'm Cheska. I've introduced myself quite enough, but if the accent hasn't given me away yet, I'm Filipino, but I'm based in Germany at the moment. Really, it's my first time working remotely. So like many of you guys, I'm also very new to this remote work gig, but I've been loving it so far, to be honest. I have background in digital marketing, but it's also my first time working in a startup. So especially with Butter, it's actually given me a lot of learnings as to how to not just collaborate with the team while we're not physically present, but also how to build businesses a lot more from the ground up. So that's been such a lovely journey. I'm passionate about solving problems and helping people connect. And that's also why Ben was such a lovely addition to my life this year. And I really, really, really am thrilled by the power of community. I can't say that enough. Like later, that's also something that we'd be touching on, like how you can actually harness the power of users, of people, to also help you build out your own products and solutions. So that's something about, hopefully you get to know me a bit more throughout. But back to the crux of it, which is essentially what is like our story in Butter and also what we've been trying to build. So just as a quick, if you guys haven't noticed yet, we are a full suite for online workshops. And that's essentially our mission. Like what we're trying to build is make sure that online workshops are much, much better than live ones. We still have a bit of a way to go, but our approach so far has been to ensure that facilitators actually put their energy and focus back into online workshops or on their participants. And we do that by having an all-in-one tool approach and help them prepare, run, and debrief their sessions all from one place. And hopefully you guys can also play around with it later and share your feedback with us, more importantly. But it wasn't actually like this from the beginning, to be honest. Later we'd show you, I'd be showing you some of how it started. But Jacob is here with me, so he knows the story a bit, but I'll try to give it a bit of justice. But essentially, it started when the three of them, the people who were behind Streamcrux, which is now not there, but essentially our trio of hustler, hacker, and hipster, which is our founding group and what they call themselves. They initially had a startup called Streamcrux, which is a game streaming or game streaming platform community for that, but it didn't really quite work out. So but they still wanted to build something together. They were an awesome team and they wanted to still be together and try to solve the next big problem. When they were doing that, Corona hit. So as you can see here, we all really didn't, some Asians probably expected it, aka Wuhan, but we didn't expect it to be the extent of what it is now, right? But that was actually where it all started. What the three guys sort of did, along with the other team members before, was essentially build up this initial idea for a startup, which sort of helps companies transition to remote work. So it was called Remote Camp, and essentially it was a framework wherein you needed to understand the competencies of different companies, depending on like how skilled or how well versed they are when it comes to remote collaboration. And essentially that framework was delivered through a workshop. So that was the first part. It was really a way for us to generate ideas eventually to mutually, which will eventually lead to Butter. But what they found was that essentially these things, there was actually a bigger problem than delivering workshops itself or delivering the remote camp framework or workshop. It was that the biggest realization, and I was slightly with them already by this time, it was that remote workshops were super difficult. And later, I hope you guys can also share with me how you personally feel about remote workshops. But when we were delivering these workshops, and some people in the team had live session experience in the sense of giving strat consulting sessions, things like design, sprint, so on and so forth. But when you tried translating a lot of the live session skills that you would normally use in real or in-person sessions, it actually just felt a bit flat online. Remote workshops were super duper difficult to give. Lots of potential reasons for this, but the first one was something around a lot of the tools that we use for online workshops are just not built for it. The tools like Zoom, for example, or Google Meets are built for more straightforward meetings and office sessions. So it wasn't necessarily something that would help you collaborate or inspire people towards an outcome. And if you've noticed, if you've been in Zoom sessions, Zoom fatigue is really real. A large part or a large number of times, it actually feels as if you're talking to a blank wall, much like the picture here. And it requires a lot out of facilitators to get people to engage during the session. And there's also lots of tech needed. These are some of the initial problems we all felt. And this was something that we actually tried to validate. And later, this is what I'm going to be sharing with you guys. But from this first sort of run at the online workshops, this was delivered. This was established. So it was we were called Meat Butter before. And yes, if you guys, like probably the people in the States sort of have a wink wink connotation to meat butter, we also got a lot of it when we were first rolling it out. But essentially, meat butter was not, this is the first run. So compare what you guys are seeing now to how it initially was, right? This companion app was primarily used when we were delivering the workshops, and it's massively different from what it is now. It started essentially as a companion app to Zoom, and it was the main functions that were built in were something around asking questions or getting feedback from people, as well as an agenda. And we soon found that that didn't really quite work, even for the workshops that we were giving ourselves. And this is how, like, the process after that, of when we found that, okay, meat butter in itself was not necessarily the best sort of solution to come with. This is the approach that we took to sort of deliver against what we have now. So 3 principles we were always sticking by all throughout. And hopefully you guys are also doing this in your, or will be doing this in your own sort of sessions or in your own work. The first one was really understanding whether there was a problem. So the way we tried doing this was going very back much to grassroots and just talking to people. People like Ben, people like other facilitators we've along the way really helped us in terms of understanding or being a lot more focused as to what problems we needed to be solving as a product. Second one is doing things that don't scale, a bit counterintuitive, but at the same time, it really, or we feel that it has worked for us, especially at this early stage. And then the last is around building in public. Is everyone, hopefully everyone's still with me? Yes, no, questions, confusion? Okay, cool. Right, so I'll just move on. If I'm speaking a bit too fast, just feel free to maybe put a confused emoji so I know when to stop. Okay, first one is around talking to people to validate their problem. It sounds super duper simplistic, but at the same time, it really, really helps you understand what the pain points that you need to be addressing are. And for us, like from the companion app, we ourselves, when we tried, like one thing was observing what we also felt ourselves when we were using the product. Obviously, like when we were trying out the companion app, it didn't really quite work, but we still felt that there was promise because the problem was real. But how to compound that problem is essentially by talking to more users who might be feeling the pain or might be feeling the pain a lot more than us or than all of you guys. So when Meat Butter first started, we actually spoke to hundreds, and trust us on this, it's hundreds of facilitators. So everyone, people who are doing workshops, trainings, design sprints, leadership coaching, HR, organizational training, so on and so forth. And just to understand a bit more about the different pains, and the different pains specific to different use cases or different types of people, whether they be in a boutique agency or in whether they facilitate independently. And we just plainly asked them and showed them the product. So if you can see here, we were quite scrappy in also how we approached it. We weren't really just relying on people, like, because a lot of times people just build the product and they expect users to come. At the onset, we were very, very active and actually very manual and manual in how we sort of approach things. We call it like scrappiness, essentially. We were posting in Facebook groups. We were direct messaging people on LinkedIn. We were posting on Slack. We were trying to infiltrate or listen to people's conversations on Twitter and sort of intercept that. So something to help us sort of understand and land the pain problem a bit better. And through this process, what we found was, one, that there were 2 key pains we needed to solve. The first one was something around technical overload, and the fact that for a lot of these facilitators, they actually need, I think, anywhere between 3 to 7 tools open in one go for them to run workshops effectively. And what that, like, I remember one facilitator even mentioning having a 12-inch Mac and needing to carve out her screen to have 4 apps open. That was super clear to me. Like Zoom open in one, Slido open in another, Microsoft PowerPoint, Mentimeter, let's say, and needing to scramble between these apps was one of the biggest pain points that they felt. And just imagine, especially if you're trying to do the workshop independently, instead of focusing on the workshops that they were meant to be guiding and the participants that they were meant to be leading, they actually ended up focusing on the tools instead. So that was the first problem. The second problem was something around energy, which I already mentioned earlier, and something we're all feeling, or we feel sometimes. And that's something that doesn't even need explanation. Sometimes it's just online workshops aren't as inspiring as they usually are in real life. And sometimes it just feels plain boring. So those were the two problems that sort of came about after talking to users. And what we sort of learned in hindsight was that, one, we were really able to see whether the problem that we initially felt was real. And then also we were able to identify the best first customers along the way, right? Because more often than not, when we try to build solutions, we love, or this is something that isn't really for me, but try looking through some of the Y Combinator stuff. It's really quite good. But a lot of times we try to talk to people about the idea or try to pitch the idea immediately rather than understanding the problem itself. And more often than not, instead of talking to real users, we end up talking to people who are just there to sort of support and love us along the way, regardless of whether we have this stupid or harebrained idea, like our moms or parents, for example. So what we found is, one, yes, your friends or your parents are always going to be there, but remember the mom test. Try to talk to real users, not people who will be there to support or love you unconditionally. You need to be able to understand the problem a lot better and the solutions that might come from it. We need to really approach it more from an unbiased perspective. And then the second was we shouldn't focus on the idea, but rather on the user's life. So try to learn about the specifics of their frustration and what challenges they're finding. So for example, if one person earlier mentioned drying her hair was a problem, if someone else feels the same pain, ask them, like, what was it about? What is it that frustrates you when your hair is wet when you go out? What does it feel when you're in the office? What does it feel when you're out with friends? How does that make you? Does it make you embarrassed? Does it make you social stigmatized? So things like these, getting a lot more specific about what they feel in different situations also really help. And for us, this is a bit of a question mark for me as well, because we were actually doing a lot of these demos or a lot of these interviews in the product. So sometimes they would notice the product, Meat Butter, and then they'd also share about their life. But when that happens, when you're in the situation wherein you're trying to interview people or get unbiased opinions, try as much, and your product is in front of you, try as much as possible to pull the conversation back into the actual problem of your users. And these are some of the key questions that, it's super simple, but key questions that really help along the way is, one, what's the hardest part about doing the thing that you're trying to solve? Ask them to tell you about the last time that they've encountered that problem. Because when you do this, it does two things. One is it lets you focus, or it lets the person you're interviewing focus a lot more on the concrete and the specific thing that they experience, specific problem that they experience, and even take you through the process that they had when they experienced that problem. And at the same time, it also helps you gauge a bit, like, how often do they experience this problem, which sort of indicates to what frequency or market there is. So why it was hard, so the motivation and the underlying reasons for the problem, as well as how they've tried solving the problem, and what they loved or didn't love about the solutions that actually that they have tried. So instead of focusing here on like features that you need to build, try to bring back the conversation to a more high level, wherein what specific aspect did they love about it, rather than zooming in on certain features that they might have tried. So this was something around the first part on talking to people to validate. And maybe if you guys again don't mind, can you share? I'm assuming everyone here has also done research or tried to get as much insights for the products they're building. So I'd love if you guys can share the most wild or outrageous way you've gotten insights in the chat. So I won't be able to go through it all of it right now, but I'd love to see it at the end of the session as well, because hopefully that will also inspire every one of us in the call to do our own way of scrappy research. Okay, you can see people are typing, so I'll move on while that's happening to the next one. So the next is something around doing things that don't scale. I remember like when I also first when I joined Butter full time, like one of the things that Jacob kept on harping on was the idea that instead of doing things en masse, you need to do things that do not scale. Reason being, we're super early stage, and what we needed to build was actually more the insights around the product rather than doing things that would really help us grow our user base. So it was an active, especially coming from digital marketing, right? Wherein you need to do everything to be like our main focus was always around awareness, acquisition, so on and so forth. It was almost like taking a step back and understanding what would keep people in, what would make our product a lot stickier, and what key value do we need to deliver at the end of the day. So how we tried doing that, as I mentioned, was super manual at the start. I mentioned earlier we were going to Facebook groups. I remember even we had this really long Google Sheets list of all the Facebook groups we've posted it, or all the Slack channels we've posted it, and it was super manual. But we tried to that sort of helped us understand as well and focus on what are the things which worked in terms of channels. We were also doing a lot of direct LinkedIn outreach. Like Ben, for example, was one of the unfortunate people we outreached to. So it was literally just asking, so kind of pitching them about the idea of what we're trying to build, asking for their help in terms of interview. And if they say yes, then all good. But if they say no, then you move on to the next sort of person who can help. And that sort of approach, that whole manualness of the approach, really also made us understand, back to the earlier one, who were the people who were feeling the biggest pain and who were willing to give us that early love and support, and eventually help us build the product along the way. And what this meant as well was that instead of just the people we were directly hitting, some of them were even so kind enough to even extend or promote about us outside of to their own network. So, for example, here you can see Rob was one of the early. Rob Hamblin used to be with AJ and Smart, and he's with his own company now. But he was one of the people who initially gave us that push on, okay, you guys are really solving that big of a problem, and I really love the solution that you guys are trying to build. So he was all out in terms of promoting us, and even helped us with some sprint ID or sprint initiatives along the way. There was also something around like what Chris. This is something lovely. Like what Chris did was just post about us on listings or post about us in forums. And that actually, like, in as much as manual as it seemed, it did get the interest of Ryan Hoover, which was, I think back then, I was just trying to also go through our Slack channel for this one. I think every love message we were getting from users, we were just constantly posting, and we were also very ballsy in trying to approach users. Like, I think one thing that this also helped us do along the way was don't ever get scared of getting rejected by users. It just means that they don't feel the pain as well as you hope they did. So even going for big names like Rob Fitzpatrick, for example, the author of the Mom Test, we just like randomly found his name in one, or found his email in one of the online forums, and then decided to email him. Same goes with some of the other people who are quite influential in the Sprint community. And that helps us sort of build the early user love along the way. And they were also quite willing to even share about it to their friends and help us recruit more participants as well. So this is something you can hopefully try exploring. And this is do things that don't scale as a mantra isn't really new to people. It's especially essential when you're just trying to get your first 10 or 100 customers. And it's tapping into like what Intercom and Asana did here, tapping into the power of your personal network, even asking your friends to maybe refer you people who might be feel, or who might be a bit more relevant to your product and getting them to be or getting to interview them, getting them to try out and give you feedback, so on and so forth, or showing up in the places where you feel that users are. So for example, what Dropbox did, super infamous story of them posting a demo of their video on Hacker News and just seeing the response that came from that. And even Figma just posted about their stuff on Twitter. And this was just a super interesting way to see what sort of reception you would get from people and how you can essentially turn the feedback that you're getting, the inputs from users into insights that will fuel your product. So this also just taking a bit of a step back. This isn't just about doing things that don't scale, as I mentioned, is super counterintuitive at the start, but it's a really great strategy to have early on because it helps you do three things. One is it helps you recruit the users and build that engagement or that emotional connection with them upfront. Build delight about your product, like even if it's a shitty product. If you're able to make that, I mean, again, this is not a quote from me. This is a Paul Graham quote, which I love. Where you can and should give users an insanely great experience with an early, incomplete or buggy product if you make up for the difference with it in terms of attentiveness. So the care that you actually show users matter a lot. And that's something that's a mantra, or that's a thing that we still live by now. Like, for example, Jacob still does. Everyone in the team still does customer support and intercom tickets quite heavily because it's not just, it's a way for you to build that extra level of care for the users and ensure that they actually see us not as a product, but also the humans behind it. So getting them to rally for you in a way is super helpful. And the last thing and super important thing is because you're building that one-on-one connection with users, we're also able to get that feedback loop going. So as you can see here, this is just one snippet that a lot of the users, even Ben, for example, just sometimes DM, sorry, Ben, for dropping your name a lot, but he DMs us a lot of inputs or insights about what's happening in Taiwan, what are the things which are working well for him when he uses Butter in his sort of sessions, so on and so forth. So that really helps us in terms of focusing on the things that we need to improve in the product. And again, not focusing too much on growth, but ensuring that just users feel invested in what it is you're trying to build, constantly give you that input to help you improve it. And hopefully things will go right in the long run. Because for us, the whole thing is that it's not a matter of just putting people into the bucket. It's a matter of ensuring that we're fixing, if let's say the way we funnel in people into our product is a funnel, then it's better to just stop and ensure that people are staying rather than continuously filling from the top. So that's something that this has also helped us do. Okay. Last, and I know I'm gonna be a bit tight, so I'll try to run through this so we can get to the meat of the workshop. The last is something around building in public, and this is something that's again super duper close to our heart, especially with the idea of community. But it's a principle that the ideas just compound if you involve people. We're not building solutions alone. It's a matter of ensuring that all the users feel quite invested in what it is you're trying to build and are always constantly giving you insights or feedback along the way. So for example, that's how we've approached community. Like, super kudos to our new head of community, Anna Maria, for doing that super readily. But the way we've approached building the community, which is sort of a separate product to Butter, is not separate, but like essentially it's a bit outside. But essentially the community, the mission, the values, the activities that we have now, we actually involved users in developing that. Because that just means that whenever you build it out with them, it means that they're more likely to stay because they actually share the problems with you, as I mentioned earlier. They share the activities that they want to have, and they had a hand essentially in crafting out the roadmap for whatever activity it is you're doing. Another thing is using low-key means like posting on social channel, for example, to ask specific questions to your users about things that might help your product or specific features that you're building out. Like, for example, this one. It was just a post with Jacob when we were doing the workshop builder, and he just plainly asked out into our social network about questions that we were actually trying to ponder about or reflect on internally. And then the last is ensuring that whatever feedback it is that you get, and this is something that we're also still trying to fix, to be completely transparent, but ensuring that whatever insights or inputs you get from users are also funneled back into the team. So much like the example here from Ben, so he literally just shared a couple of ideas that might eventually spark insights or spark product features for us. And just ensuring that there's a flow of that from whoever's collecting the data into down into the product team. And some principles to sort of share here is that users, why you need to build in public is that users really know their problem the best. So involving them upfront helps you fuel that solution a lot better. But at the same time, what we need to remember is that users also probably don't know what it is that they want. So we need to be able to lean on them for idea sparks and inspiration only, but never let them dictate what the solution is. Because if for example, for butter, if we did that, we probably have a bit of a Godzilla or Frankenstein sort of Frankenstein sort of product rather than what you have now, which is super cohesive and super lovely done by the product team. Yeah, just be bold in using scrappy ways to sort of get insights or fuel insights into your product. That's those are the three things. And I know it's a bit of a monologue, but bear with me, guys. I'm almost there. So just a quick recap on what this has helped us do, right? First one is something from the companion app that you saw. It moved on to this a bit of a clunky or less clunky app, which is the 1.0 version that we have here. To now it's the 2.0 and beyond. So even now we're focused quite heavily on how do you build delight into when you're running your workshops. How do you do that with a lot more fun, and also preparing your workshops with ease. But more and more you see it being built out as a fully fleshed workshop tool, which allows facilitators to do everything from prep, run, debrief, all in one app. And there's loads of ideas here in terms of preparation, especially, and even breakouts, things that we can definitely talk your ear off during the Q&A. Second thing is like we've been able to build a team. This is a super fun team to be in, but we're fully remote. Right now we're 18 people, 9 nationalities, and I can't tell you enough how awesome of a team it is and how lovely it is to be part of it. So that's the second one. And obviously in terms of growth, I know it must have been simplistic when I was going through it, but this has really helped us fuel the growth in terms of users and time spent on Butter. And these are just some of the numbers, but more importantly, it's also helped us fuel that Butter love. So people are super vocal by how much, and this is not, I hope we're not tooting our own horns too much, but they're quite vocal about how delighted they are by Butter. And we've actually just been picked up by more and more people for the segment that we want to own, which is workshops and trainings. And hopefully, eventually, you'd also see us getting stronger and stronger product market fit. So these are some. And then that's it. Actually, thank you so much for listening to me. And I think before we move to the workshop, I'd love to know first if you guys have, thank you for the reactions. That really helps. See, energy, guys. Before we move to the workshop, which is actually going to be a lot more interactive, I'd love to know first how you guys are feeling. So just a quick mood check. If you can share a GIF in the chat, that would be super lovely.